come out with a book. My drug dealer brought me to God, and it's so telling. I mean, the title is so telling, and I think it makes everyone so curious about what's inside. Like, what do you mean your drug dealer brought you to God? So can we just start with how you decided to write a book? How this all started?
Yeah. So funny enough, I was at my first in-person book reading today, and this lady, it was at a church, and it was after their service, but not everybody came. Some people did, and some people didn't. But this lady, she didn't even know what was going on, and she was like, "What's going on in here?" And I said, "Oh, we're doing a book reading, blah blah." She's like, "So your drug dealer really brought you to God?" And she bought a book, by the way. And then she asked me that question after, and I said, "Yeah." And I said, "It's not metaphor. It's not metaphor. It's real." My drug dealer literally had a conversation with me about her story and her faith journey. And through that, I had just stopped hard drugs a month before, and I was doing just like pot and marijuana and drinking and stuff like that. And so we were sitting there kind of drunk and high, and she told me about her faith, and it led me to my faith. And that's a whole story in itself. But my main mission is to help people learn that they have a story to share.
Mm-hmm.
And just like my drug dealer shared her story with me, as I share my story, my hope is that it ripples out and helps other people share their story and so forth. So
Amazing.
that was the premise behind really why I was called. It was a real divine call. I was a little apprehensive, or a lot apprehensive at times, to share my story so openly and publicly, though I've been doing it for years, formally and informally through nonprofit work I've been doing, to share it, like to stand alone away from, the nonprofit, not standing behind a nonprofit, sharing my story or at an event or whatever, going out and sharing my full story, and then kind of using that as a catalyst to help other people has been kind of a scary journey, but also like so amazing and fulfilling at the same time.
That's so great to hear. I know we can talk about the book tour dates just a little bit later, but is it okay if I read the back of this book?
Yeah, certainly.
Just to give the audience a little bit more of an idea of what's going on and kind of what to expect when reading it. So here we go. And I'll just read kind of the first two paragraphs. So Ryan Joseph Allen's life was on a downward trajectory. As a child, he felt different from other kids and struggled to fit in. Even at a tender age, he contemplated suicide. In his teenage years, as a young adult, he hid his true self and numbed his emotional turmoil with alcohol, drugs, and self-destructive behaviors. When he summoned the courage to share his secret and come out to a close friend, her response added another layer of self-hatred. How could he love and accept himself as a gay man when he was taught that God and the church considered it wrong? In My Drug Dealer Brought Me to God, Allen recounts his quest to find meaning, self-acceptance, and his life's purpose. He battles addiction, the heartache of disappointing, toxic relationships, and alienation from his family. One day, his co-worker, roommate, and friend and drug dealer, Marie, shares her belief that God made everyone for a purpose and wants us to be ourselves. The conversation ignites Allen's new understanding of how faith can be inclusive while stepping into his own definition of God. Those two paragraphs kind of just sum it up. But could you just share what God means to you? What is your definition of God?
Yeah, so I shared this earlier today as well. And I said, if someone in the community, in the LGBTQ plus community, picked this book up and thought that it was going to be like Christian rhetoric or traditional Christianity, that would be a misconception of the message of the book. So I do identify as Christian, but let me explain what that means. So for me, it's really important that people know that means that I live Christ-like, which means to me, Jesus was kindness, compassion, empathy, love, caring, hope, all in who he embodied as a person. And so he's one of my main guides, one of my main leaders, one of my main prophets. He is like my leader. So that's why I consider myself Christian, because I strive to embody those things that I believe Jesus embodied, historically that we see, biblically that we see, but also who I've built a relationship through meditation and communing and talking with and sitting with God and Jesus. I really think it's powerful when we form our own version of what we were taught. A lot of us were taught certain things about Christianity, about heaven and hell, about the Bible, about blah, 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 and we could go on forever. But it doesn't really, what really matters out of that is what we've felt in our heart. And that's what Marie's message was to me, to dive into your heart and look and see how you feel God loves you, how you love God. Where I pushed that aside, I would have really identified as agnostic or atheist at that time, even though as a child, I would have identified much more aligned with Christianity or God. And that since I was taught. And then when I realized I was in the LGBTQ plus community, and then I also realized I didn't fit gender norms even before I realized I was in the LGBTQ plus community, like way young, like 2 or 3, I realized I was different. 4 or 5, definitely different. 6, maybe I'm, in this LGBTQ plus community. By the time I'm like 8 or 9, I definitely was like, I'm in the LGBTQ plus community. I don't have the same gender norms as like all these kids around me, my brother, my stepdad, my friends. And so it pushed me farther and farther away from my relationship with God, because I was taught God was this Christian God, and that he was very adamant that like LGBTQ people didn't have a place with him. That's what I was taught by not even my close family, but just my extended family, community, churches I went to in the community, preached this rhetoric that was really harmful. One of the stories from growing up that's in the book is about my cousin Billy. And cousin Billy, people would say, "Oh, pray for cousin Billy. Pray for cousin Billy. He's damned," and blah 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 blah. Just go on about pray for his salvation. He's gay and blah blah blah. And for one, he wasn't out, and he still isn't out. And I changed his name, so no one knows who he is. So that's good. But it was horrible to hear that, even though they didn't know I identified as LGBTQ plus. And it really hurt me and created all this religious trauma within me that really set this foundation of like self-loathing. So it was like my meso level trauma that created some macro level traumas of self-hate and self-destructive behaviors that led to all kinds of other traumas. So it was this kind of journey through learning what God is to me, like feeling God in my heart, and realizing God to me is just love, and love is God. And that's biblical, but that's also like when I looked into myself, it was like God is love and love is God, and that's all that matters. And God loves you innately for who you are. That means like God loves you no matter who you are, everyone, no matter what. And that's no ifs, ands, buts. There's no love the sinner, not this. There's none of that rhetoric. God doesn't think that way. At least my God, my version of God, just loves you unconditionally, period. And so as I dove into my journey the last 10 years and got completely sober during that time, and really worked on myself, worked on loving myself, worked on my relationship with God, worked on my spiritual relationship with the world and the universe, worked on my relationship with my family that I had hurt a lot during my time of addiction and self-destructive behaviors, and worked on my relationship with my child, who's now 10 years old and is happy and healthy and vibrant and beautiful, and really worked through all of those things, being God-centered, for me, love-centered, heart-centered. That's what that means to me. They're all interchangeable. When someone says God-centered or heart-centered or love-centered, that's all the same to me. And I just also want everyone to know, like, you have your right to believe whatever you want to believe about whatever you want to believe. And I would just always urge people to look in their heart to find out what that means. And you don't have to use certain words, or you do, but I purposely reclaimed the word Christian and God for myself, for other LGBTQ brothers and sisters and humans out there that have faced turmoil, judgment, even worse, persecution, condemnation, whatever it may be that they've had to endure, that I've reclaimed it for myself. And you have the power to reclaim whatever words you want for yourself and to believe whatever you want. And, I find that really beautiful. that we're all on this journey to learn more about ourselves and to learn more about the world and to learn really more about our hearts and that kind of trickle out to the others around us.
That's
Long answer.
beautiful. No, it's okay, because I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially people who are LGBTQ plus. Um, a lot of us have grown up and have been raised in like the Christian faith, whatever sect it may be. A lot of people who are raised in the Christian faith are taught to judge. And there's a very interesting and powerful passage in the Bible that says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." That is, I think, super important in growth. You know, that I think is ultimately Christ-like, to love one another and judge not, because we don't know what anyone else has been through. And I think judgment kind of separates us, kind of pulls us apart. It doesn't bring us together. So I think so many people, including LGBTQ plus people, can relate to your experience of just feeling rejection and disappointment and finding themselves and learning to love themselves, learning to love, you know, to find a definition of God that really brings them in and doesn't push them away.
Yeah. And judgment is such a, it happened today, when this lady bought my book before my book reading. She said, "Your drug dealer really brought you to God?" And I said, "Yeah." And then later on through our conversation, she said, "Well, she must have found God around that same time." I said, "No, she'd always identified as Christian." She goes, "Christian drug dealer." And so I know she didn't mean it that way, but but I was like, once you understand why, when you read the book and you see Marie's journey and you get to see she was trying to get her kids back from a divorce, and she was homeless. I let her live with me, but she still didn't have enough money to like get her own place. And she was working full time. It wasn't like she wasn't working. She was working full time, and she was selling drugs on the side to get her kids back. So like everyone's story is different, everyone's journey different, even a drug dealer. Now,
Right.
some drug dealers, not good for our world, or whatever. We totally can agree with that. I mean, I've been sober for 10 years. I'm never like a supporter of like that, but I'm also a supporter of people. And Marie's journey was that she was literally selling pot, mostly pot, to friends and family or whatever, so that she could make money to get her kids back. So that's a much different rhetoric than what we're taught about drug dealers.
Right.
And so it plays into what you just said about judgment, is we shouldn't judge others because we don't know their journey. And even a drug dealer, we can't judge, because in this case, this drug dealer, who was my friend and roommate, literally helped save my life. I mean, every time I talk to her, I'm still friends with her. I tell her, like, thank you for saving my life. Like, you are the catalyst for me reconnecting with myself, with God, with love, and learning how to love myself, and to start this journey that I've been on now for 10 years. And it's taken an academic turn as well. As I continued my education, I almost got kicked out of school when I was still actively in addiction to opioids. And after I got sober, I finished my undergrad, went back and got a master's, went back and then got working on a doctoral degree from Xavier. And I'm right in the middle of my dissertation right now, working around religious trauma for LGBTQ plus individuals and post-traumatic growth after that. And that's all a catalyst from Marie, a drug dealer, sharing her story with me. So no one should have the right to judge people, because without someone like that, without her, without this drug dealer, I would not be where I'm at today. So, and everyone has the ability to look at themselves when they start to judge someone and take that out. Observation's healthy, judgment is never healthy. And it's not healthy for you or another person. And if you're judging other people, it's typically a reflection that you judge yourself even worse. And this pops up for all of us. We live in this world, this human world, and we're all human. So it's okay, but just to realize it and pull yourself back in and get heart-centered and realize that that's not you. That's your traumas. That's your, you not feeling good enough when you were a child. That's you feeling maybe like abandoned when you're a child or now. That's you not feeling loved, that now you're projecting onto other people in whatever way, shape, or form, that turns into kind of this judgment. And it's really a judgment to yourself. Every time we pass a judgment on others. So every time I think that, when I start to judge someone, I'm like, oh, whoo, I don't want that energy. I don't want to be hurting myself and hurting someone else at the same time. Not good for that. So that's helped me a lot in the whole judgment area, because, that's one of my hardest things is that perfectionism has been really challenging for me. I write about it, and I coin a term called bestism, which is the opposite of perfectionism. It's doing your best in that moment, every day, and every moment's different, and every moment's shifting and changing. And it's kind of this piggyback on self-judgment. I judge myself so much. That's where perfectionism comes into play. That's why perfectionism is bad, in my opinion, in my belief, in my experience. Perfectionism is bad because I was always judging myself to do better or be better, instead of just allowing and doing my best. And then at the end of the day, not judging, but observing how I could do better or what I could work on, and then working on that. There's a big difference between observing and judgment. And it comes in, it plays in with perfectionism, it ties into all of that. And so thanks for bringing that up. It's something that I've not done much talking about, other than in the book, and then in kind of my external processing with like partners or family or friends. But it's definitely a big piece of my journey too, is that getting rid of that self-judgment. And then it helps to not judge others. But when you judge yourself less, you end up not usually judging others as much as well. So
Definitely. And I think what you're doing with your education, and I know I saw on the back of the book, I mean, you're not only are you an author, you're a transformational coach. And I think so many people need that, especially now during COVID. A lot of people are not going out as much, not being as social. And for some, that can be kind of harmful, especially if you have mental health issues, especially if you're judging yourself a lot. They need someone who's on their side, someone who is able to coach them and allow them to transform and grow, to find that happy place.
yeah. And I see transformational coaching as this way to almost do like a peer support group, but with two people. Like it's like a one-on-one. So it's like a facilitator of a peer support group and then one participant. So it's less about telling people this or that or the other, what they should do. It's more about listening. It's more about finding some common threads and highlighting them so they can see it, and then offering up some solutions that might be helpful. It's different than like therapy, and it's different than like a peer support group, because there's more than two people, obviously, typically in a peer support group, but it has that essence to it. I think peer support is so strong because it's a peer. So it's like I am, education wise, like I don't have a clinical degree, but I have a lot of experience educationally, and then from my own experiences. But I talk more from a peer standpoint. It's like, oh gosh, I went through that. I'm going through that, or I have a friend who's going through that, so I can relate to what you're going through. So let's talk that out, figure out some solutions from there. So it's not from a place of like, I've achieved, the ultimate guru status and spirituality or something. Let me help transform you. It's not that. It's you transforming yourself and just kind of having a mirror. So someone to like reflect back what you're sharing to help you to see things more clearly, to clean off your mirror for you, because sometimes it gets pieces of dust or dirt on it and you can't see. So I'm there just to wipe it and guide and be gentle, but also sometimes show you like, hey, there's a big blemish right here. What are you going to do? Do you see that? Or how are you going to go from there? So I like coaching for that reason. And that's one of the reasons I didn't go clinical for education, because I think people are healing in a lot of different ways right now, and clinical is a huge way. It's not just needed, it's valuable, especially where we're at. And peer support is really helpful. Nonprofits are extremely helpful. That's why I got involved in the nonprofit world years ago and helped co-found a nonprofit, actually multiple nonprofits, but one main one. But it was this piece that like, I knew there were other ways to help people. And so that was where coaching really fit in for me, because I saw it as a different catalyst to help people learn and grow about themselves and about the world, and really help them to help themselves. Because that's really the ultimate goal, is we can't give people the answers. We can't give people healing. We can't give people their own love, their self-love. They have to learn how to have self-love. They have to learn how to have this healing. They have to learn how to, but we can offer tools and examples and mirrors for people to help on their journey. So that's what I see coaching as. It's very interesting. Every client's different. Every person's different. Every friend is different, and I think as friends, we end up doing this a lot of times for our friends and close relationships. It's kind of like this coaching for each other, like a peer coaching model, which I find really helpful in my friend dynamics. It's like we all support each other both ways, and I find that really valuable too. So everyone has the ability to do that work. It just takes a little bit of time to figure out, and to get into that heart space is really always my thing is like when in doubt, get into that space where you can feel your essence and your purpose. And then it's a lot easier to help yourself and others. So.
Wonderful. Well, I want to ask you just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
And just going back to the book for a little bit. What part of the book did you have the hardest time writing?
Gosh, so it shares me and my mom's journey. And we had a rough journey in my teenage years. And so now we're best friends. So, but that writing about that was really challenging to say, how do I share this in a way that, feels good to both of us, that doesn't hurt you, that doesn't make you feel bad, but still is able to share the pain and the challenges that I faced due to our relationship. And some of that was just a miscommunication. I mean, at one point she sent me to an all boys Catholic school thinking it would help me because she thought I was having problems at co-ed school because of the girls. But really, it was just because I was having all kinds of problems. They weren't really related to girls. And putting me in an all boys school when I was in the closet, a gay man or bisexual man in the closet and a all boys school was like super detrimental to me and my journey. So it's things like that she didn't even know in the moment. She was just doing her best, and I didn't come out and share that my LGBTQ identity with anybody until I was 14 or 15, and by then it definitely wasn't my family. So she didn't know that I was struggling with that and trying to figure that out, and that putting me in a situation where I was surrounded with no support group. Like we were just talking about with like this peer support and this one-on-one mentoring and coaching, even in high school, you have friends, and sometimes you have friends that might coach you in the wrong direction, but that's just a part of our journey as kids. But, I had a support system, even if it wasn't 100% healthy and amazing, it was better than having no support system. So when I changed schools to this all male school, it was like detrimental. So, I talk about that. I talk about our relationship. I talk about how it all crumbled beneath us and then how we worked on building it back up. And we discuss in here, my mom actually writes the part of the prologue and a part of the beginning of another chapter. So her voice is in this. She shares her story a little bit. She shares her story about me and her and how she came to healing with that. And then how together we kind of had generational healing for our whole family and family lineage by healing me and her's relationship. It's allowed other things to heal throughout, kind of in more spiritual realm, but heal throughout time and space and all of that. So we've really done a lot of work transmuting a lot of the pain and sorrow and turning it into love. And that was the hardest part to write about because it was like having to relive it. And it's like I had already worked on forgiving and releasing and not even thinking about it. And then writing it was like triggering for me and her in a lot of ways. And so we had to have a lot of long talks about that part of our lives when we both had kind of already moved past it, so we could learn how to share it with others in a way that felt good to us. So that was challenging.
Well, we can see the beauty and the challenge. And I'm so glad that you were able to get through that, because I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to their loved ones, just being accepted by their loved ones, people closest to us. So yeah, thank you for that. And I kind of know the answer to this because we have had conversations, just as you've been developing this book. So, but for the audience, what is a significant way your book has changed since the first draft?
Yeah. So the first draft, I was like really gung ho. So I audio recorded this book first, very raw, almost like a podcast style narration of my journey. And I went to a few publishers and they were like, great idea, publish a podcast. And I said, well, I want it to be something more like an audiobook. Or they said, that's not a thing. Like, in the industry right now, you write a book and then your book becomes an audiobook, and that's how you do it. And I said, okay. So I sat with that for a little bit. I was like, I don't know if I want to actually write a book. I said, I can transcribe my audio recordings and put it into some type of like informal like journal book. I thought that would be a really cool style. But after talking to some strategists and some people that were like in the book industry, they're like, great. And it might be some type of marvel and really take off. But in traditional publishing, like that's not a thing. And you're not going to be able to, they brought me back. They said, what's your main intention? What's your goal? And I said, I simply want to share my story so other people see that they have a story to share. They share it, and then it creates ripples and it makes communication between people much more accessible. And then it makes these gaps between us much smaller, and it makes us come together. So that's my pretty much goal. I said, get in people's hands and get into their hearts and let them look into their own journey and just see where it can help them grow or learn. And they said, well, if you do what you're thinking, you're going to help people, I'm sure. But they're like, you're not going to be able to impact the same amount of people in traditional like media markets. So I said, okay. So I sucked it up and I got a manuscript strategist, and we went to town on kind of deciphering what we wanted to put in this book and how it was going to happen from these like 18 hours, I think, of raw podcast style recordings. And then we turned it into a book with a 40-page workbook that's included at the end of the book. So we really took it and dissected what were the big messages and learnings and knowings. I call them knowings. It's like these things that what are these things that I needed to share with the world? So we pulled those out, put them together, and then edited it, and more edits and more edits and more edits for months and months and months, seemed like forever. And finally got to this place where it came together for me. And it's honestly is when we pulled the chapter about Marie. So Marie's story, my drug dealer, when we pulled that from the middle of the book and put it into the front of the book to give context to the rest of the story that's after, things really shifted for me and it started to come alive. And I was like, this is the book that I need to put out. And, then you struggle though, because I wrote this 2 years ago. So then you start changing little things here or there that you can change, but you have to realize like, I'm not the same person that I was 2 years ago. I have different beliefs and, similar core values, obviously, or the same core values, but things have shifted. My belief in one area might be a little different now, or I might have way extended knowledge about things like post-traumatic growth or generational trauma or whatever that I've learned in school or through experience or through trainings or through whatever. And I don't always have that knowledge in here because this was written 2 years ago. So it's like a 2-year-old, it's like me 2 years ago version of my life. So I had to like work through that. And that was really challenging. That was probably the hardest iteration, was realizing I couldn't add anymore. The last iteration was like, okay, well, we changed this or this and this and this, but we just have to keep it because that's where I was a year and a half, 2 years ago when we wrote the book. So, and I've heard that's a really common thread with authors that they'll often feel that same way. So I was like, I just have to surrender to that and release it and know that, it's meant for what it is. And it was divinely guided. And I just kind of went with the process and let go of all my attachments to like, that had to be perfect because it's never going to be my version of perfect. And I also then had to like use my own teaching to get myself back in line and say, this is the best I could do when I wrote it 2 years ago, and the editing, it's the best I could do in the moment, the best I could do. And it ended up being a great product, but it's a great story. It's a great book, but it's still really hard for me to own that because there's always these pieces I wanted to add and make stronger and build upon. And that's where it's been that's part of the challenging part of the book process. You asked what the most challenging part of the book was to write about my mom, but this was like one of the other challenging parts was like finally saying like, it's done, it's ready, because it's never going to be, it's not true on how I feel in the moment right now. Like I have so much to add in every area or take away this or add this. And like, I just had to come to terms that the message is still universal and still love based, and it's still important. And yeah, and it was a fun experience. It was challenging at times. I cried a few times, which I usually don't cry unless it's like a sad movie, or like if I'm crying for a friend that's going through a rough time or something, or I don't cry about being like sad or stressed, but like I had a few moments when I was like overwhelmed and stressed, or like releasing stuff from my childhood that the book brought up as I wrote it, or whatever. And so I had to work through all the emotions of like being excited, self-doubt, tears, laughter, love. My partner wrote a chapter in the book, and that was like, it's one of my favorite chapters in the book. And Harper wrote a letter in it. And so there's like all these people that contributed to it, and so many beautiful people like you who helped me as I was getting started to like really form what story I needed to share. And that my story was important, that I had something to share with everybody, that I had a love to share as well. And so that encouragement along the way was like unsurpassable as far as what I needed in the moment. So you really helped with that. So thank you, Elaine. I love that you're able to help bring this to life. Like this book is partly because of you. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for sharing it with me. It's so touching because, like I said, it's so relatable. All right. So before I get overwhelmed with tears, I want to just let everyone know where they can get a copy of your book.
Yeah. So you
go ahead.
You can buy it on Amazon. Just type in "My Drug Dealer Brought Me to God." The launch day was so great. We ended up with 4 bestseller categories, and 9 #1 new release categories. So it was like really well received.
Congratulations.
You can also, thank you so much. Like it was a night where me and my partner did not sleep. We literally stayed up all night, and we sent out about 2,500 direct messages to people asking them to purchase the book, and to support me and support the message, and to become an Amazon bestseller, just because that bestseller part helps sometimes with speaking or coaching or getting into certain areas like the library systems and stuff like that. They like to see that on there. So it was really important, even though like to me seemed trivial, like in the big scheme of things, but it was important on the journey. So that was great. You can also purchase it on my website if you want like a signed copy. And then I'll send it out to you. Or you can come if you live in the greater Cincinnati area. There's 5 public readings. There's 1 private, but 5 public readings in this month of October. Yes. The next one is coming up really soon on Tuesday, the October 5th, at Trinity Episcopal in Covington. And then there's a few more scattered throughout the month. If you're looking for one that's not at a church or a spiritual center, because I think the rest -1 are churches or spiritual centers. Chad is one of the stops. So Creative House of Art over in Covington, which is owned by Chad and Chuck, which are 2 awesome LGBTQ members in Cincinnati that opened like an art studio / bar / lounge. It's like super fun and cute, and should be a great night. So if you want to come and have a drink, mocktail, cocktail, either one, and come out and kind of support and listen and be a part of a community conversation. Because that's my hope, is to talk, share a little bit about my book, and then have other people share and talk and communicate, kind of have a roundtable discussion around certain things, typically the intersection in mental health, LGBTQ plus stuff, also recovery, addiction, suicide. I mean, kind of run the gamut of having all kinds of different intersections. And October makes a good month for that, because there's National Coming Out Day, LGBTQ History Month, other mental health months, associations. So it makes for a good time to have these conversations, and just to break down some barriers and get to know ourselves more and other people more, and the world in a clear lens. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity to chat with people and create some love through conversation. So
yeah, wonderful. Well, I just want to list out the dates. I have them right in front of me. And I just want to say October seems to be, for me, just a month of transformation. I mean, the weather changes, feel like people's perspectives, their preparation changes for the rest of the year. So it's a really great month to kind of do all of this, to have these community conversations. So you said you just finished your the one today. And there's another book tour stop on Tuesday, October the 5th, and that's going to be at Trinity Church in Covington, Kentucky. And there's one October 16th at First Christian Church in Covington, Kentucky. There is one October 22nd, which is at Chad, the one that you just were talking about in Covington, Kentucky. And then we have one October 27th at the Florence Christian Church in Kentucky. And last one is October 29th at New Thought Trinity in Ohio.
And New Thought Unity. Yep.
I'm sorry, New Thought Unity in Ohio, right? So, I mean, and also I saw that you were broadcasting live as well, right? So if they can't be there physically for whatever reason, they can definitely tune in virtually.
Yeah, most of the spaces are doing their own type of live event through their social media or through their YouTube. But if not, then I will have someone to record it on my Facebook or and then I'll share it on my Facebook author page, which is just Ryan Joseph Allen. You can find it pretty easily that way as well. So that way you can stay connected and be there virtually if you don't feel comfortable with everything going on right now. And that's why we wanted to offer like mostly hybrid options and not just in person. We wanted people to at least have access to being a part of the conversation, or at least seeing the conversation. Different places are doing different things. So some are more interactive. So we expect a big hybrid group. So it will be like you can join in and answer questions and communicate back and forth. And other ones are just going to be kind of watch, kind of like a presentation, but just depends on kind of the venues kind of choosing that piece of it, which is kind of nice to not have to have my hands in everything all the time. So yeah, I'm super excited. Today's event went really wonderful at Treehouse, which is a community center in Mount Auburn. It's a connection to the Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church. So it was a great time. It was just a great conversation. It was like I said, my first time reading in public and in person. And I shared with them, it was funny. They were like, "You did so good." And I said, "Well, I have a fear of reading in public because when I was really little, I had a speech impediment. And I don't even write about this in my book, but I had a speech impediment. And so I wouldn't want to speak a lot. And when that was fixed or like healed up, I didn't want to like read a lot, because when I could speak, I could control not using the R's and L's and W's that really tricked me up, but reading I couldn't. And so obviously I wrote this not with that not in mind. And so like I'm reading it and I'm like that little child in me is like, oh no, like what if you do this? And that's just part of me, every now and again I'd mess up a word or something. And I was like, I love it. Like I don't ever want to feel like I'm opening this book like and just very politician-y or even from another like really polished standpoint. Like I want it to be put together and I want it to flow and make sense, but I never want it to be like rigid or feel pre-rehearsed, because it wasn't. Like I went in today, this isn't the book, but I had like little pieces of paper of places I could talk, and I just really started with one story, and then we started talking and people would ask questions and I'd share another story, and then we'd share another. Someone would say, "I want to hear something about Harper, my daughter." I said, "Oh yeah, here's a story about her." Like we just kind of flew and flowed and went, and it was really lovely. So that's kind of what to expect. They aren't super formal events. I purposely kind of opted out of like a big book launch where I sit on stage and read a book and everyone listens, and at the end maybe ask questions and sign books. Like this is much more of an interactive experience and much more casual, much more heart-centered. I open with a meditation, very short meditation, not to be scared of. And no, you don't have to participate, but just like a breathing exercise and a short little visualization exercise. And anyway, just trying to get people back into the heart space, because like I myself fall out of that heart space really easy in this world we live in these days. So I have to pull myself back in.
I want to thank you so much for being a part of this interview. Thank you for being a part of the conversation, bringing the conversation to others, and for writing your book, My Drug Dealer Brought Me to God by Ryan Joseph Allen. Now, if viewers are interested in purchasing the book or learning more about Ryan Joseph Allen, you can go to www.ryanjosephallen.com.
Or you can just email me, Ryan.Allen@lovemustwin.org. you can reach out many different ways.
Okay. Well, we'll have more information about all of your book tours on our site at cincyunderground.com. So thank you again, Ryan, for being a part of this. I appreciate the conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just a reminder that everyone is innately loved for just who you are. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to be good. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. You are loved universally. You are loved by my version of God, and I love you just for who you are as well. So just wanted you to know that as a parting gift of love for you.